All right, I am going to get started. So I would like to welcome all of you to the Plan Unit B presentation. My name is Dory Dalton. I'm the wildland specialist and a firefighter for the Genesee Fire Protection District, and I'm also a community member here, and I have been for the last 10 years. This evening, you will hear from Brian Mallet, the open space manager, Nancy Balter, Becky Smith, and Chris Garlasco of the Genesee Fire and Safety Committee. Our presentation is recorded and will be posted for later viewing on the Genesee Fire Rescue website and the Genesee Foundation website. We've set aside an hour and a half for this presentation. Please mute yourself during the presentation. As questions you have come up, please put them into the chat box. The chat box will be monitored and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. So feel free to put those questions in anytime you have one come up. All right, let's get started. So what is a Community Wildfire Protection Plan? So our district's plan was updated from the 2008 report. It was an 18-month project that was completed in April of 2021 in partnership with the Forest Stewards Guild. The CWPP is a tool for Genesee Fire Rescue, land managers, residents, HOAs, and it helps us prioritize projects to make our district safer in regards to wildfire emergencies. Please remember that it is a snapshot in time, and our project included data that by driving all the roads and a general on-the-ground assessment of risk factors that were collected. All right, so we want you to know that we model potential wildfire behavior under the 60th, 90th, and 97th percentile fire weather conditions, and these are conditions that occurred in our district about 40%, 10%, and 3% of the days between June 15 and October 15th, the period often associated with large fires in Colorado, and the data was collected from 2009 to 2019. Our weather parameters came from data collected at the Lookout Mountain Remote Automatic Weather Station, also known as RAWS, and fuel moisture conditions from the Fire Family Plus. When we talk about red flag day warnings, that means fire weather conditions are present and include warm temperatures, very low humidity, and stronger winds. And they're expected to combine to produce an increased risk of fire danger. The higher the percent, the higher the fire danger. We talk about the 97 fire weather conditions modeled in the CWPP. These would qualify for a red flag warning, and they're similar to the conditions that occurred during the Elephant Butte fire on July of 2020 to the southwest of the district. Genesee Fire Protection District experienced 5 red flag warnings in 2019, 16 red flag warnings in 2020, and during the 2021 season, there were 3 red flag warning days in November and 4 days in December. And during that time, there were multiple wildfires, including the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history on December 30th. The conditions that were used for the 90th percentile fire weather scenarios would constitute a red flag warning day only if widespread thunderstorms were predicted for the area. Conditions used for the 60th percentile weather scenarios have higher fuel moistures and lower wind speeds. So this evening, when we talk about your plan unit,
here's our plan unit.
Plan Unit B, you can see on the screen, it's this light purple color here, and it's outlined in dark black. These are the streets on the left that are included in your plan unit. All right, so our plan units were created along HOA boundaries and property boundaries with considerations of roadways and topographical features. So as we talk about this today, we want you to understand the ways that wildfire threatens your home. And here's 3 ways that it does. We have radiant heat, and radiant heat is the energy that's transferred through the air to other objects when materials burn. If a house receives enough radiant heat for a sufficient time, it will ignite without flames contacting it. Sometimes radiant heat can break the glass and windows, allowing wind-blown embers to enter the house. Even if the radiant exposure isn't large enough or long enough to result in ignition, it can preheat surfaces, making them more vulnerable to ignition from exposure to flames and embers. Even vegetation and other fuels located away from the house can pose a threat. And then we think about our wind-blown embers. And embers are the most common cause of home ignition. They are light enough to be blown through the air and can result in rapid spread of wildfire by spotting, in which embers are blown ahead of the main fire, starting other fires. And finally, we have direct flame contact. And this happens when fire reaches your home through the tree crowns or along the surface of the ground to your home. All right, so this slide shows the hazard ratings for your plan unit. Before we start going into specifics, I need you to understand the entire Genesee Fire Protection District is 95% more likely to have a wildfire as compared to the rest of the US. So this puts us at an extreme hazard rating. The ratings of the different plan units are relative to one another, and they're based on 4 variables. And the first variable we're going to talk about is fire risk. And again, you'll see it in the middle, and your plan unit is outlined in this dark black. Okay, and your fire risk are based on fire behavior, which would include wind, temperatures, low humidity, the topography of your area, the location, and the fuel involved. And you can see that this is rated at a moderate risk. Then we talk about suppression challenges. And again, you're outlined in this dark black. And these suppression challenges based on the fire behavior, the weather, the topography, the fuel, and the location. What are the challenges that emergency personnel could have getting equipment to the area? It's important to keep your roadside vegetation cleared. Our optimal driveway and roadside clearance is 13.5 feet high by 20 feet wide. And these are based on Jefferson County recommendation and Genesee Fire Rescue Apparatus size. And you can see again, you're rated in the moderate hazard category. Then we move to our third variable, which is going to be our evacuation hazard. Again, based on fire behavior, the location of your plan unit, the visibility during the fire, during the evacuation, the width of the road, the type of the evacuation notice. Is it the entire community evacuating or just part? Are residents exiting while resources are entering and there's two-way traffic? Are you on a non-survivable road? Given those things, you can see that your plan unit is rated in the high hazard rating category. Finally, for the last variable, we talk about your home ignition zone hazards, and that's right here. Again, you're outlined in this dark black. You can see that it's a dark maroon color, and this is going to be based on your home ignition zone hazards, which would include the materials your home is made of, your roof, your siding, and how much of a defensible space you have created for yourself. And a defensible space is that 100-foot circle around your home up to 150 feet if you're located on a slope. Defensible space is the buffer you create between your home and the grass, trees, shrubs, or any wildland area that surrounds it. This space is needed to slow or stop the spread of the wildfire, and it helps protect your home from catching fire, either from embers, direct flame contact, or radiant heat. Proper defensible space also provides firefighters a safe area to work in to defend your home. We, the firefighters, have to have space around your home to make a stand to prevent fire from reaching your house. Think about your home. Would we, the firefighters, be able to defend your home without putting our lives at risk? We would like to see fire on the ground in mitigated areas where we can have a chance to stop the fire and not allow the fire to go from tree to tree because trees are too close and dense or have ladder fuels under them. We cannot fight fires in trees. And as you look, your home ignition zone rating is at an extreme risk. Given that all of the variables together, your plan unit comes out at a moderate rating. Okay. So when you think about that, the CWPP highlighted some different things in your plan unit. You can see them on the screen. We have homes built with a mixture of fire-resistant flammable materials. There's some forests that are dense on north-facing slope. There's defensible space work around some homes, but there are trees that overhang the roofs. Most private drives have adequate turnarounds for firefighting equipment, but most are narrow, which could be an obstacle. About 60% of the unit is at risk of passive or crown fire activity. About 20% of the homes are at risk of extreme exposure to radiant heat and spotting. And approximately 5% of the roads, private drives, and driveways have potentially non-survivable conditions. And those things were modeled under the 90th percentile fire weather conditions. So I'm going to explain the flame length and the crown fire. If you look on the left, your plan unit is outlined right here in blue. So the modeling is based on fire weather conditions at the 90th percentile. You can see here that the majority of the color in here is mostly peach. You've got some spots of red. So with this particular modeling, it most likely the fire will be controlled with a hand line with flames under 4 feet. But if the flames become greater than 4 feet, we have to bring in equipment. And in these areas, these with the red in here, this is potential for significant control issues. Okay. And then we talk about crown fire, and that's on the right side of your screen right here. You're outlined in this blue. The majority of your plan unit you can see is this orange color. Okay. So this lets us know that at 90th percentile fire weather conditions, that here you are most likely to have surface fire and passive crown fire. And this means that the fire is spreading due to surface fuels. And so it's right here. It's kind of an example, right? So we're talking about the fire moving in bushes, grasses, or other small trees under the canopy. And then that allows the fire to move up into the trees, right? Because of those ladder fuels below. And you could have patches of stands of trees that torch because of the fuels below. So that's what that represents. Please remember that Genesee Fire Rescue, we will stay and fight the fire until the fire behavior makes it unsafe to do so. So I'd like to draw your attention to these neighborhoods. The neighborhood on the left, you can see these homes. We have 2 homes that are virtually untouched, and then 2 homes that unfortunately did burn down, and this is due to embers. You can see the trees around them. They're not all destroyed. These homes burned down because of embers. You look at the neighborhood from the recent fire in Superior, and these homes were destroyed by embers and radiant heat. Now, this is a fire that happened in Cold Springs in Netherlands, and this property survived. This property participated in an assessment out of Boulder, and you can definitely see the break in the fuel continuity here in their zone 2, 5 to 30 feet from their house, and they did it around all of their structures, right? And so this home did survive. So there are steps we as homeowners and community members can take to help lower our risk, and in many cases, our neighbors' risk as well. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about canopy spacing and minimizing flame length. The information that I'm going to share with you is based on the Colorado State Forestry Service latest guidelines and science. Okay, on the left here, we talk about canopy spacing, and the recommended spacing is 10 feet between crowns. When we talk about crowns, we talk about the most outer reaching branches, not the top of the tree. So there should be 10 feet of space between your trees. And if you have trees on steep ground, then the spacing should be further. And then we talk about limbing. And it's recommended to limb your trees 6 to 10 feet from the ground, or 1/3 the total height of the tree, whichever is less. And we mean from the outer branches. So if this tree is trimmed up, limbed up 6 feet, then a 6-foot person should be able to stand here and not have the tree touch their head. All right, and when we talk about removing ladder fuels, you can see the example here on the left. This tree, the branches grow really close to the ground and there's lots of vegetation underneath it. We mean to remove the vegetation under the tree and to limb it up so that there's nothing that, if a surface fire comes, that can climb up the tree and cause this tree to catch on fire. And then we talk about zone 2, the 5 to 30 feet from your home. And the recommendation is to mow or to weed whack to 4 inches. And this is to help, decrease that fire intensity before it gets to your home. All right. So these are your exposure risks, and the risks are influenced by overlapping home ignition zones, your potential exposure to short and long range spotting from embers, and your potential exposure to radiant heat. When we look at the graphic at the top, again, you're in this dark outlined area right here, and this is the 90th percentile fire weather modeling, and you can see close to 1/3 of your home are at a high risk level of exposure that I was talking about. And here we have about 1/8 for the extreme. And then we move to the 97th percentile fire weather conditions, right? And here you are. And this jumps up to almost 3/4 are an extreme risk. All right. So again, we're talking about your overlapping ignition zones, your exposure to the embers and radiant heat. So what are some things you can do? Start with your home, all right? Your home is the most important thing, right? And that perimeter around your home, this immediate 0 to 5 space. This space should have no vegetation in it. What can you put there? You could put rocks, you could put a walkway, you could put crushed granite mulch. You could even have dirt. You just don't want any vegetation there, because as the fire comes along the ground, we want to have that buffer so it can't burn all the way to our homes, okay? You want to remove the needles from your roof. You know that. We have to do that often now. If you have a roof with lots of little nooks and crannies, that's called a complex roof. So look in those spots, because those needles like to tuck back in there, all right? Remove flammable materials from under your decks and from the top of your deck. If we're having a red flag day, you should not have an umbrella or cushions out. Take all that stuff in, okay? Remember, 80 to 90% of our homes ignite due to embers rather than radiant heat. When you're considering replacing your materials on your home, consider fire-resistant exterior materials. All right, so this is where I talk about pictures from your actual plan unit. We've had the houses are kind of blocked out, so you can't see them, but there are some things I'm going to talk about on them. So for this particular picture, this is a garage door. What you really want to pay attention to is the weather stripping all the way around the edge of your door, right? We don't want embers to be able to invade that space and ignite the things in your garage. Do you need to get your garage door adjusted? Do you need to replace the weather stripping? These corners are really vulnerable because the critters like to chew on them. So check and see. Look and see if you can stick your fingers under your garage door, okay? All right, then down at the bottom, we have some fences, okay? So what I want to share with you about fences is wood fences can ignite anywhere they have contact with flammable materials such as grass and pine needles and lead a fire right to your home. And that was a big issue in the Marshall Fire. There were lots of fences, all right? So you're saying, well, what do I do? Well, you could remove the fence, or where it touches your home, you could put in a metal gate. You just want to break up that continuity. The fences along the decking, that's a little trickier, you know? If that's not something you want to do and you don't want to remove the fence, the recommendation is to clear a space just like around the outside of your house, 5 feet out, right? With no vegetation. We don't want to allow fire to come along the ground and go all the way up to your fence, all right? On this house, what we're highlighting here is we're highlighting vents. Vents are another thing that's been found. If we can mitigate our vents, we can keep embers out another way. So research has found that an 1/8-inch metal screen to be effective in preventing large ember intrusion while still allowing for airflow into your vents. So you're going to want that screening in your gable, wall, and your soffit vents. Okay, your dryer vent, check it. Remove any lint that's accumulated and ensure that the vent cover closes completely when it's not in use, and replace it if you need to. Any of your vents that have flaps, if they're not closing completely, you need to replace them. And don't put the bird or the critter guards on those vents, because we don't want things to collect in there and not allow the vents to close. All right. Okay, so this slide is a slide full of firewood piles. And there were many more. These were just all the ones that I put on this particular slide. So firewood piles can easily ignite from embers or surface fire, and they can emit a significant amount of heat or direct flame contact that can ignite your home. So the mitigation for this is to move your firewood pile at least 30 feet from all structures and ensure there's at least 10 feet of clearance between the piles and all the trees. Okay, now this pile right here is underneath this deck. All right, so burning materials under things, they can create a lot of radiant heat that gets trapped against your home, increasing the likelihood of ignition. Okay, some of the things that other ways you can mitigate: only have what you burn. You can store it in your garage, and firewood's a big issue for a lot of people. So those are my only recommendations besides the 30 feet. All right, so on this slide, what we have this little fenced in enclosure. You know, aside from it being a fence, it's got a bunch of stuff stored in there. So if there are embers, we're having an ember shower and embers land in here, it's going to ignite all this stored stuff. And up here is a soffit. Again, that radiant heat, right? This catches fire, it's going to catch these soffits on fire. So, you know, it's really important when you think about where you store your personal items. Okay, here we have some timbers, that landscaping timbers, and we have some lattice. Lattice easily ignites, which will ignite your deck. We're not required. We don't have to have lattice under on our decks anymore. I would recommend removing the lattice so that, you know, a surface fire cannot creep up and touch it. And if that's not something you want to do, again, it would be to clear out 5 feet in front of it with no vegetation so that the fire can't directly burn and catch your lattice on fire. Timbers are tricky. A lot of us have these timbers. So, you know, the problem is the timbers are connected to our homes. All right. So if you have timbers that are within 5 feet of your wood siding, the recommendation is to remove them and replace them with non-combustible materials such as stone or concrete. And if that's not an option, then again, it's to clear that vegetation out, right? It's not to grow things in them, and it's not to have anything right here. We want to stop that direct flame contact from reaching them and allowing embers to be in here and burn and then eventually lead right to your home. Okay, and then here we have this decking with this tree just right over it. This tree definitely is really close to this deck and should be limbed up. And, you know, and if it's not an important tree, I might remove this, but it should be at least 10 feet away from the deck. So, all right. And as we look at this slide, again, you know, there is a lot of fuel right here. We have this huge spruce tree just right up against this house and over this deck. You have a juniper here, you know, you have a direct surface fire, flame contact comes right up here, gets this juniper and catches the spruce tree on fire. I have a spruce tree. I know what's underneath it. It's a bunch of little needles, right? So the recommendation, well, first of all, would be to remove the juniper. And then I would recommend removing the tree because that is a lot of radiant heat. That thing catches on fire, a lot of radiant heat. And think about your windows. If there's any windows on the other side and the radiant heat, windows are most vulnerable when it comes to ember showers. All right. And if that's not something you're willing to do, then I would definitely limb this thing up and get it back away from the deck. Okay, here's another juniper in 0 to 5. And what's the problem with junipers? They have lacy evergreen foliage that burns quickly because of its texture, and they also contain flammable volatile oils. And if you look underneath those things, you know, they lose little pieces as well. So this particular picture, this is some mulch, and here's some mulch right here. You know, mulch is not recommended. That's in your 0 to 5 space. You want to remove that mulch and put something down that's not flammable. Even these bushes are not recommended in the 0 to 5 space. All right. Here we have a bunch of vegetation right here. This is a house. So these are all ladder fuels, right? It's hard to see where one tree stops and another one ends. So, or begins. So it's really important that we're breaking up the continuity of fuel, right? We want to decrease the intensity of fire. Okay. So again, we have the timbers that go directly to the home, right? These trees, they should be limbed pretty low to the ground. Here we have some different types of stairs with the wood little lattice pieces. I don't really know what you call those, but with the grass, the long grasses, right? They go right up to the decks. All of that needs to be mowed, and you should have that 0 to 5 foot space so that the flame can't go directly up and touch it. Now, this one, another thing that was interesting to me, that's a concern, is we have these potted conifer little bushes, flammable bushes. And the problem with it is, you know, when these things are on fire, right, the flame height is 2 to 3 times the height of the vegetation. This is in a container. The soffit is right here. So if embers light this on fire, this is going to go up and it's going to catch the soffit on fire. All right. So we have to be mindful of our potted plants too, believe it or not. All right. So this slide, you know, there's just a lot of fuel continuity here, right? There's a lot of crowded trees here, long grasses. You know, as you look at all of them, there's a lot of fuel in front of this house. This is a house right here. This is a house right here. You know, I'm thinking to myself as a firefighter, if there's a fire coming in, where am I going to be that I'm going to be safe to protect your home, right? These trees, they need to be thinned and limbed. I'm not saying to take all your trees out, just give us some space to work. Let's keep the fire on the ground and get them out of the crowns of your trees, okay? All right, again, we have decks. We have those timbers again right here. If you can't remove them, then we need to create that space so that you don't get that direct flame contact. Thinking about embers blowing in here, you know, I don't know what's in there, right? So thinking about what's going to be in there to keep these timbers from igniting, okay? Here we have one of those juniper bushes right underneath the deck. Again, I'm thinking about flame height. I see all of this vegetation hanging over this deck, okay? And it really should be back, right? Here's a lot of things. It's easy to store things under our deck, right? Here's propane, right? That thing fire, that's not a good place for that. So we really need to think about where we're storing our things. And here we have this giant tree going through the deck. There's many homes with trees through the deck. What's the problem with that? Well, that's a lot of fuel. Can you make it a part of your house? Sure. But in order to do that, there can't be another crown within 30 feet of this tree all the way around. And if you are applying for a grant and you want to use it on other trees in your yard, that can be an obstacle because sometimes if you're not willing to remove this tree, you're not going to be able to get the grant. So you really want to think about those trees. This tree was close to the roof. This needs to be up 10 feet from the roof. So just think about that. All right, so again, here we have crowded fuels in here. We have stuff on the ground that needs cleaned up. This tree could really use some limbing. It's close to this home. Here, this house has started some 0 to 5. That's excellent. It just needs to come out more, right? No grasses under decks. Trees could be limbed, right? Back from the house a bit. Another house right here with the start of some rocks around it. That's great. It just needs to be extended out to that 5 feet. All right. And then I put this lowly picture of this fire hydrant on there. And the reason I did that is because with all these storms, when your fire hydrant is buried and anything happens at your house and we need it, I just want you to think about the extra time it's going to take for us to dig that out before we can get water to your house. You can adopt this hydrant. You can go to our website and you can adopt a hydrant on your street, or you don't have to adopt it. Just clean it out. It takes about 10 minutes, maybe, to clean out, and we would really appreciate it. So think about your hydrant. All right, and then the last thing that I wanted to share with you, last picture, is this address. So ask your friends, ask your neighbors, you go outside, look outside your house, go for a walk and come up to your house. Can you read it? Can others? So if you can't and others can't, I can't either. When we respond to your home, if it's smoky, if the weather's bad and we can't find your house, that's not good, right? So with the WUI code, they require sign for you to have an address sign, right? The sign and the support supposed to be made of non-combustible materials with 4-inch reflective letters on a contrasting background. You can get these through the foundation, right? And that's great because 8 to 10 years ago, there was a big push and they offered these. Well, that's mine. And so it's a great thing to have. Unfortunately, this is combustible. So I need to come up with a way to find a different combustible post, and I'm working to do that. So the fire department would really appreciate if you would get a reflective address out at the end of your driveway so we can see it. I looked to see if there was a height requirement and I did not find one. So if we get a big snow, make sure you clean that up as well and check in with the HOA. So we are working on the non-combustible post. The other caveat as well, I live at the end of a street, so I only have to have the address on one side. If you live in the middle of the street, you're going to need an address on both sides, okay? Because if we miss you, we want to be able to drive by and come back and find you. All right, so really think about that so we can get to you. I do home defensible space assessments for the entire community. If you do that, you get a report with mitigation recommendations and photographs, which you can choose to follow or not follow. It's your report. You own the data. It's not shared with anyone. No one can call me and ask me for your information. Your report isn't even stored at the fire station. It's on a server offsite. It's a certificated program, which means if you choose to follow the recommendations, I can come and look and give you a certificate of mitigation that's good for 3 years. And what does that give you? You could share it with your insurance company to show them the effort you're making, and it's a great selling point on your home. Okay, that's my contact information, and we will share that with you again at the end. So don't write it down or anything like that. It does cost $100 for an assessment. And that's what all of the fire departments up and down the Front Range are charging. And just the money that's collected is going to other community education related programs for our mitigation initiatives. All right. So I am going to turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Tori.
Let's see, Brian, we can't see you or hear you right now. Must be having some technical difficulties. Can everyone still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Brian's an evergreen, so he has a terrible time. I don't see him.
I see him, but he's also muted.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah.
And he's frozen.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'll text him. Weird.
I just texted him.
Okay. Thank you.
He said, shoot.
Of course.
He thinks he lost internet in Evergreen.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
You want to?
Sure. I'll try. Okay. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time because these are Brian's and hopefully he's going to come on and he obviously does this a lot better. So Nancy, Chris, anybody that's on that wants to say anything, please feel free. All right. You can see this slide. Let's see, you can see he presented his open space plan. If you were unable to attend that presentation, You can find it on the Genesee website. They recorded it. All right. And you can see here that he's got 70 acres of grant-funded forest restoration work, but it does not include roadside thinning. Okay, let's see. I'm afraid I'm going to click too much because I'm having issues too, but I'm going to go slow. See, it's not going forward for me.
Ryan is trying to connect.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, see mine. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I lost.
Oh.
So those that don't know, I live in Evergreen, and I lost internet right in that moment when I started speaking. So sorry about that, but it seems like y'all can hear me now. So yeah, I'm Brian Mallet. I'm the open space manager. I was going through the list here of the folks that are on the call, and I think I've met about at least half of you. So that's cool, and I look forward to meeting everybody. So Dory's got my slides here. Thank you, Dory. So we do, for those that don't know this, we do open space annual plans every year. I let the community know what I want to do on open space, and I do that in conjunction with the Open Space Committee, formerly the GEM Committee, and then it's reviewed and voted on by the board. And so I have that for 2022. It's on our website, and includes all the things I'm going to talk about. And it also includes our plans for roadside thinning and forest restoration. And a lot of the work that we do on open space that is forest and wildfire related, we get grant funded for. So we have that right now for 50 acres of forest restoration. We also have funding for weed management. And then we also did recently get funding to hire a Mile High Youth Corps to help out with our roadside thinning project. So it's a lot of good work that we get funded through the state and the feds. You can go to the next one, Dory. Thank you. So briefly, just looking at some of the things we're planning in the upcoming years with maps. In the western part of Genesee, that's all of those shapes there. That's where I plan to do forest restoration, do wildfire mitigation in the coming years. The western part of Genesee, as you all know, might be one of our more vulnerable areas as far as fire coming in. We are bordered by some large landowners, and a lot of that forest is pretty dense. And then later on, maybe by 2024 or 2025, we'll start on the middle part of Genesee as well. That sliver in between, in the middle there is Ryan Streamside Trail, and then further south there, that pink one, that's Miners Mile. So all of that again is open space. So what we're already have started is what's going on up there in the north. That's a high priority area. Those so Plan Unit B is outlined in blue, and then those different colored shapes are open space, and that's forest, and we've already started working there. To the west of that is the Ski Hill Road, and the CWPP identified Ski Hill Road as one of the highest priority, or rather highest risk areas in the fire protection district. It has to do with density of homes, but it also has to do with topography and the forest, the density of the forest. As you all know, it's very dense there. And so fire can easily start there and then enter into our community. So we're doing some protection on our border there. And then what I don't have showed here is the roadside thinning map that we have, that we're gonna implement this year as well. That is in the open space management plan on the website, but I'll talk a little bit about roadside thinning in this presentation. Will you go to the next one, Dory? So yeah, our priority, mitigating our evacuation route. A lot of that work will be happening in Plan Unit B and A. That's the northeastern part of Genesee, basically, as you all know, where everybody has to exit in order to get out of Genesee. And then we also are annually completing 40 to 50 acres of forest restoration and wildfire mitigation. Like I mentioned, a lot of this is grant funded, and this often is in your backyard, your open space. And for the folks that live off of Chokecherry and Genesee Vista Drive, private drives on On the north side, you all know, I've probably talked to you, we've been doing work there, and we've been marking, and we're going to have contractors out there this year doing work. And when I talk about what we do on open space, I say hope for the best, which is the Elephant Butte fire, which was a relatively small fire. It was put out. It was in a very dense area. Nobody was hurt. No structures were lost. But we have to plan for the worst case scenario. The Cameron Peak fire, which had the most amount of acres burned ever in recorded Colorado history. And then, of course, the Marshall fire, which was the most destructive in Colorado history, with 1,000 structures lost. And so that's what we have to plan for. And so when Dory and I come out and talk to you in your neighborhood walkthroughs, or talk to you around your home talking about defensible space, the things that we recommend are based on that, planning for the worst case scenario. And so when I bring that up, a lot of folks will ask me, if it's going to burn, why should I do anything? And there's 3 reasons why you should. Number 1 reason is emergency response. Dory talked a good bit about this. So firefighters, if they can, they're going to come in and try to protect your home, try to save your home. That's one of their jobs. And in order to do that safely, they need to have roads that aren't over encumbered with flammable vegetation, or a home that's just covered in flammable vegetation. Otherwise, they won't try to save it, even if they really want to. So making it safe for them to get in and out of these private drives, these roads. Second reason why you should do something is evacuation. If you remove some flammable vegetation around your home, along your egress route, you can make your evacuation safer. You could give yourself a little bit more time. And the third is you can actually prevent your home from igniting. It's never a guarantee, obviously, but if you do all the things that Dory recommends, you are increasing the chance that your home will not ignite in the event of a wildfire. So for those reasons, those are why you should do something. You can go to the next one, Dory. So, okay, what can you and what are you able to do in Genesee on your private property and the surrounding open space? So priority for us is the major roadways, your evacuation route, and we're only working on open space, Genesee Foundation, what we own. And then the property owner, you're responsible for mitigating your own defensible space. And I know there's a question in there, and we'll definitely talk about that at the end, even if it extends into open space. So some of you I know have done this or planning to do this, but there are avenues to just fill out a form, go through a process, and we're trying to make that process a lot easier for Genesee residents to remove trees or limb trees or mow grass on open space. All of that becoming part of your defensible space, making it easier for you to do that. And there's, for anybody that was present on the board meeting last week, we introduced 3 new policies specifically to make it easier for folks to remove trees, and talking about the ARC and what you can do on open space, and what the board of directors would allow, that kind of thing. So generally trying to make it easier. You can go to the next one, Dory. So what is a non-survivable road? This was brought up in the CWPP. They define it as portions of roads adjacent to areas with predicted flame lengths greater than 8 feet under severe fire weather conditions. So let's break that down. Flame lengths greater than 8 feet. Typically, flame lengths can be 2 to 3 times the height of the fuel source itself. So if you have a blade of grass that's 4 inches, or rather 4 foot tall, we often see that fields of tall grass, then the flame length can be 8 to 12 feet tall. So imagine if the wind is pushing that over across a road, then you've got flame lengths exceeding 8 feet. And then you can extrapolate from there, go to a juniper bush, which is maybe 3 foot tall sometimes, but it's really wide as well. So it's got a lot of fuel on it. So imagine that 2 to 3 times flame length coming off of that. And then you can go all the way to a tree, which can be 30 to 40 to 50 foot tall. And if that, it can be torching straight up, or the wind can be pushing it horizontally across a road. And then you have 30, 40, 50-foot flame lengths going across the road, and that does happen. The next part of the definition, drivers stopped or trapped on these roadways would have a low chance of surviving radiant heat from fires of this intensity. Dory talked a bit about radiant heat and what that means. And that goes back to my point of planning for the worst case scenario. The Marshall Fire is a good example of people getting the evacuation notice for the most part, but the evacuation routes were known. There was the sheriff did a good job of just getting everybody out. There were no issues. There were other scenarios. Dory, will you go to the next slide, please? Oh, that's on the next one, but I'll talk about this one quickly. So where are our non-survivable roadways in Genesee, according to a CWPP? So they did a model, they put in some parameters, they have an algorithm, and then they figured out based on the vegetation, where you're gonna have flame lengths exceeding 8 feet. So you can see on the left everywhere in Genesee where it is, and then we zoom in to Plan Unit B. You can see there's a good amount. A lot of our private drives, some of the county road as well, Current Drive, and it's what you already know. There's a lot of trees hanging over. There's a lot of small trees. There's bushes, what we call ladder fuels, and then it's just a dense interconnected forest. So the forest is connected with everything else around it, and if there's a fire starting 100 feet, 200 feet away, it's going to be quickly on top of the forest that's right next to you. Dory, you can go to the next one. So this is what I was going to get to, where in the bottom left, that's from the Paradise Fire in California, people were having to drive through fire. So this is obviously a worst case scenario that we want to avoid. And then on the bottom right, first responders having to drive through fire. They might be doing that anyhow, because that's part of their job, but we want to make their job as safe as possible. So a lot of the roadside thinning that I'll be doing, again, it's on open space, will be on some of those primary roads that are primary evacuation route to avoid scenarios like that. In case we do have traffic backup, we don't want to have fire on our evacuation route or coming over our evacuation route. You can go to the next one, Dory. So some photos from Plan Unit B. This is Genesee Vista Drive. On the right side is open space. It's only about 5 feet of open space, and it's just a short amount. And everything beyond that 5 feet is private property. So I just wanted to point that out, that I plan to do what I can do on open space. And for folks that might see that, where I'm working on open space, but it gets close to your backyard, if you want to see what I do, then maybe imitate it later on, remove some of those really small, easy trees, plan that out for the slash pickup that we do every year. And then the slash drop off that Dory's going to start doing too. She's going to start this year with that. That'd be great. But these small trees are just, low hanging fruit, something easy to get done that has a big impact. Those small trees are ladder fuels. So they're the things that catch fire first, the grass, then the small trees. You can see they grow close to the ground, and they burn first. I also put the width of the Genesee Vista Drive. It's about 26 feet wide. I'll show some photos of the private drives. We know they're not as wide. But if this dense stand of trees extends about, I think like 30, 35, 40 feet, if all of that is on fire, it's going to easily have flame lengths hanging or blowing over the road, provided the wind's going that direction. So that's part of what I'll be doing for roadside thinning. You can go to the next one, Dory. This is at the end of the cul-de-sac on Sumac Drive. Again, just easy things to do, removing these small, some folks call them volunteer trees. These are the kinds of trees that would have burned in a naturally occurring wildfire if we weren't here, if we didn't live here in the mountains and we didn't suppress fire. These trees are the ones that would have burned 30 years ago in that fire that would have started in a lightning fire. But because we suppress fire, because we live here, we need to go in and mechanically imitate fire. to preserve the health of the forest and remove some of these small ladder fuel. And you can see that there's larger trees above it. So that's where the ladder fuel term comes from. You can go to the next one, Dory. And then another image from coming into Sumac. So you note that obviously that drive is a lot more narrow. You know that when there's snow on either side of the road and only one car can pass. So 14 feet, if you have big trees or even medium-sized trees on fire, the wind's blowing over there, it's easily exceeding, the flame length is easily exceeding 14 feet. And then I put it at the bottom there. It's kind of hard to see with this tree, but it's a spruce tree, and spruce love to grow all the way down to the ground. So they are their own ladder fuel. And I know a lot of folks do this, but it's great to limb those up 10 to 15 feet. I say, Dory mentioned 10 feet. That's the standard for defensible space. If it's right on an egress road, maybe consider limbing it a little bit higher, if that tree can handle that. And what I mean by if the tree can handle it, if you're not removing more than 50% of its 50% of its foliage, so that it can continue to photosynthesize. That's the standard right there. So I also want to point out there's a lot of big trees, a lot of big, beautiful ponderosa pines that maybe wouldn't have burned in that natural fire 30 years ago, but they're all close together and we have homes close together as well. Some of those big trees do have to go sometimes. And being the open space manager, I can go out on open space and cut the larger trees that folks generally don't see to reduce the density of the forest, but then also remove some of the larger trees that need to go along the roadside. And I know that's a very difficult decision for a homeowner that might only have 30 or 20 trees on your property. And that's a really big deal. So I recognize that, but we have an overly dense forest and we have a very high wildfire risk. So some of those hard decisions are ones that you have to make. And I think that's it, Dory. The next one should be Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Balter. I'm a member of the Fire and Safety Committee. And I'm going to talk mostly about evacuation and emergency preparedness. What Brian talked about in terms of non-survivable roadways, you also need to get out of your driveway. And hopefully the fire isn't here. It wasn't a lightning strike that started right by your property and you're already involved. So it's important to pay attention to what's around your driveway, following the same guidelines that Brian talked about. You can certainly see with that wood pile there that an ember landing on that wood is meant to catch fire and between trees, and that's a driveway. So that could be a real issue. And then on the left-hand side, just a lot of trees around two driveways, going across the driveway with the vegetation. Next slide. So these are the general guidelines, and I'm not sure if Dory mentioned all of the presentation will be recorded and posted, as will the slides. So you don't need to be furiously writing everything down. But it's basically the same guidelines that Brian talked about, and it ends with be sure you have that the emergency responders can find your house. Next slide. So the CWPP included a evacuation modeling, and it assumed that the entire fire protection district got evacuation notices at the same time, and modeled if everybody took one car versus everybody taking two cars. What the takeaways from this slide, you guys live in the front section. Remember, everybody has to exit to I-70. It's the only way out of the community. So even still, even though you're on the front side, it could take you If everybody just took one car, close to 2 hours to get out. And if every house took 2 cars, then you're talking more like 4 hours or more. This is a real issue. If you have to evacuate, we would ask that you only take 1 car. It will help you if everybody in the community sticks to that. It helps the entire community. As we've looked at the evacuation issue, we're very concerned about everyone having to evacuate to the north. And it isn't just that the people who live on the south side of the community have extraordinarily long evacuation times. It is also that it is possible that fire could start on the front side and block our access to the evacuation routes. And then we're in big trouble. So there's been a lot of continuing work, and you're gonna see it all very shortly. The Fire and Safety Committee has a egress working group that's looked at a number of additional potential ways of getting out of the community. Having an additional way that leads to I-70 is probably not going to help as much. Whereas if we can get down to 74, that is a whole different way of getting out of the community. So takeaways including just take 1 car, be prepared to leave immediately. You don't have to wait to get an evacuation notice to leave. There are worse things in the world than evacuating when you don't need to. I forget what the third was. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we have a number of egress challenges. One of the things that's of great concern, we're worried about losing our houses, but we're even more worried about losing lives. And to the extent that we are going to have a very long evacuation time, we are going to be stopped on roadways. Even if the fire isn't here when we start evacuating, if the fire comes and we're in a non-survivable roadway area, we risk loss of life. And so we really do need to address this. The last thing we want to do is lose residents because they can't get out. And we also want firefighters to be able to come into the area. As I said, we have an evacuation working group. I think by the end of the month, by the middle of April, you should see the report. We had experts look at all the different possibilities for additional evacuation routes and rate them in terms of their evacuation benefit and their fire protection benefit. Some of these actually provide very strategic access to areas that can be important to protect Genesee from a wildfire that's approaching. Next slide. Okay, so be prepared. If you get an evacuation notice, you should be prepared to get out of your house 10 minutes or less. The first thing that happens is you have to be notified to evacuate or to prepare to evacuate. Jefferson County currently uses a system called Code Red. Code Red automatically enrolls landlines that are not voice over internet protocol landline. So if your landline is through Comcast, it may not be automatically registered. Your cell phones are not automatically registered. You have to go into code red. You can get to it at your911.net and register every way in which you want to be notified of an emergency in your area. It also will let you know if severe weather is expected and other things. You can set it to how you want it to do. If you have a caregiver in your house, somebody watching young children or elderly, be sure that they also have code red so that if you're not home, they know. Have a family emergency plan. You should sit down, even with young children, and talk about what would happen if there was a fire and where would you go. Have a default place where you will meet if you can't contact each other, as you may have heard with some of the fires in California. Cell towers were destroyed. People couldn't even contact each other. So if you can't contact each other, everybody's going to meet at Aunt Mary's house. Similarly, everybody can try and contact through a single person, assuming that they can get through. So know what you're going to do. Have a plan in case you're not home and your latchkey kids are home. And a lot of that involves talking to your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors about what your street looks like, what kinds of challenges there might be, how might you be able to mitigate, but also talk to them about what would happen in an emergency. Do you have a dog at home and you both work? If it's during the day, you're not going to be home. Could a neighbor go to your house and get your dog? So same thing with kids, elderly, etc. Have those discussions, have a plan, and be sure everyone in your family knows the plan. On red flag days, where winds are high, relative humidities are low, it's kind of like what happened in Boulder at the NCAR fire. Be prepared to leave immediately when you get an evacuation notice. There are people who also say if it's a red flag day, have your go bag, and I'll get to go bags in a second, but in your car, ready to go. Maybe back your car into the garage or driveway so you can just get out. Next slide. So this is a brochure that was published by Rotary Wildfire Ready, which is a group sponsored by the Evergreen Rotary Club. They have done phenomenal, easy to read evacuation and fire mitigation and emergency preparedness brochures. They are, we had a bunch of them printed. They are at Vista. When you go in the main door, they're on a table. You don't even have to go into the office per se. So this is an idea of the kinds of things that should be in your go bag. Things that are that you could need, and everybody's going to be a little bit different, but it's at least a starting place with what should be in this go bag. What we have done, my husband and I, because we figure if we evacuate, we're going to my daughter's house. And so we actually, in addition to the go bag, we have packed a bag that has medications and changes of clothes and pajamas and, what we would need for a few days at her house. But we do know that we also need to have things for the drive out because you just don't know what you are going to find. The next slide is the backside of this. And this is a couple of things. What to wear. Nothing synthetic. Synthetic materials will melt in heat and burn you. You want to wear cotton. You want to cover as much of you as you can. You want good shoes on, not flip-flops. We now all have N95 masks. So have masks in your go bag. You could actually put the clothes that you would wear if you had to evacuate right with your go bag. Now, you could receive a prepare to evacuate instead of a evacuate immediately notification. If you have time, these are things you can do outside your home and inside your home to prepare your house to make it more likely that it can be defended or that it doesn't burn. This does not include taking down trees, but it does say, let's say you have cushions on your patio, on your deck furniture. Take them in, move things away from your windows. I have this list on top of my go bag so that I can look at it. Anybody who's had to evacuate will tell you, you're not thinking clearly. And you need to lay everything out so that you don't really need to think. If there are last things that you need to put in that you don't have an extra of, like a phone charger, have that list right on top of your go bag. Don't assume, oh, of course I'll remember that. We have a member of the Fire and Safety Committee who also has a home in California, and her community's been evacuated several times. And she said the first time, the most forgotten thing was the phone charger. Next slide. Becky.
Hello, everyone. I'm Becky Smith. I'm also a member of the Fire and Safety Committee. We are doing these presentations to make you aware of what the wildfire risks are that the CWPP identified, and tailoring it for your neighborhood so that you know a little more specifically what your risks are. And it's a lot. Hopefully, we're also giving you resources and ideas of things that you can do that will make a difference. Things that you could do this weekend, small things about limbing up a tree and keeping your grass short this summer, that, as Dory illustrated with those photos, can really make a difference. Something else that we are hoping to achieve with these presentations is to encourage you to schedule a neighborhood walk. And this is a chance for you to meet Brian and Dory face to face and walk your streets and ask questions about, a stand of trees that concerns you, or, what to do about some shared defensible space. And it's also an opportunity for you to have those conversations that Nancy was just talking about. You get your neighbors together, you're talking and you're walking, and you start asking about pets or just situations, or, if you're on vacation, just give me a call so I can watch out for your home, that sort of thing. So again, we're really encouraging you to schedule these neighborhood walks. Next slide, please, Dory. And so what we need is for someone to step forward. If you're motivated, if you really want to take action and do something based on what you've heard tonight, send an email to the Fire and Safety Committee. The email address is on the screen there, and we'll help you schedule something coordinate something with Brian and Dory's calendar. And if you need ideas on how to plan it, it's really pretty simple. But if you have contact information for your neighbors, we can help you with that as well. So please just step forward and schedule a good time with the neighborhood walk. I think right now the dates that are available are out in May. So the weather should be nice and warm by then, hopefully. Be a nice time to walk around. I have Dory's email address on here again, just to remind you that she does the home assessment. This neighborhood walk is a more general discussion to talk about neighborhood risks and open space, and what Brian would do, for your egress route with open space. Dory will address your home specifically, and she will cover everything. So I put her email on there too, so get in touch with her. Next slide, please, Dory. And so we're just going to wrap up here with a few resources. Like Nancy said, this is being recorded, so don't feel like you have to write this all down. And I think Dory's also going to put a link in the chat with this and more information. So I'm going to hand it back to Dory.
Thanks, Becky. All right, so I am going to stop sharing. And I'm going to ask everyone to participate in a short poll. It's only 5 questions and it's multiple choice, and it's just about the presentation. And if you wouldn't mind filling it out just to let us know your thoughts, your opinions, and if there is a topic we did not cover, please put that in the chat box so that we do put your questions in. This poll, I'll have it up for like 2 minutes. It's multiple choice, super simple. And while you're doing that, I will get the link to share with you. I really appreciate you participating in the poll. Let's see, there we go. While you're doing that, I will put the link in the chat box, and I will put it in again before the end of the presentation. So, all right. So I will leave the poll open for about another 45 seconds, and then I will end the poll and we will have some Q&A. So please get those questions in the chat box so we can answer them for you. And if you're done with the poll, click on that link so you can save it. That link will take you to a page I've shared with you with all the links on it. There's a lot of information on there, some good stuff, some really good stuff. So save it. And if you lose it, email me and I'll send it to you again. About 10 more seconds. Thank you for participating in the poll. Again, if there's something that you feel like we should cover and we haven't, please put it in the chat box. All right. I am going to end the poll. Okay, I'm going to end it. It looks like some people are. Okay, I'll do that.
We tried to submit our answers, but it said it would not accept our submit.
Huh, some people, that's interesting because some people do have that issue. So thank you. I appreciate that you tried. Don't sweat it. All right, Chris, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right.
So, hi, everybody. I'm Chris Garlasco, also with the Fire and Safety Committee, and I'll help go through some of the questions this evening, get some answers for you. First, before we jump to the questions, I just want to reiterate that all of this good information is on our Genesee Foundation website. We've got a great fire and safety page. So anytime you're trying to remember what we talked about or you're looking for it, a lot of the diagrams that were used are all available. We've got a whole page with resources and links. And a lot of those documents are, again, explained on the website. So I guess first up, we've got questions about trees. And Brian, maybe just to clarify a little bit, what if your defensible space includes some trees on open space? And Linda asked about trees between homes that might still be open space or common property.
Yeah. So as much as I would love to go and help everybody out with their defensible space, we've got our priorities for the community. Like I mentioned, for roadside thinning, and forest restoration. So your defensible space is your responsibility. You can remove trees on open space. It's a simple and becoming simpler process of just filling out a form, possibly asking for ARC approval as well, but it's they don't have any issue approving that. So yep, trees on open space are part of your D-space and you can remove them generally. And then in between homes, yeah, we have a lot of that, especially here in Plan Unit B too. So discussing that with your neighbors, and I think if we do a neighborhood walkthrough, which I know we've already done one on Pomegranate, you know, it does spark a lot of good conversation among neighbors, and a lot of good understanding comes from it.
Yeah, what are there better trees to have than others? You know, than in your yard if you're thinking about taking some trees down or have a situation you want to put a tree in?
Yeah, so all trees burn, all shrubs, grasses, they all burn. And some of the natives that we see up here that don't carry fire very well are aspen and cottonwoods. I think you all know aspens can be tough to get going, but once you get them going, once they get past that stage where the elk don't destroy them as much, then they do pretty good and they can propagate on their own. So those are good ones to have. You still don't want it within 5 feet of your house. You don't want any flammable vegetation or anything that can burn within 5 feet of your house. But yeah, a lot of folks do plant aspen out there after they take down some of the conifers, and it takes a while to get it back, but it does come back. It's native, it belongs here, and it's a good thing to plant.
Now, taking down a tree is pretty expensive. So Linda also asked about, is the HOA doing anything maybe to put together vendors that might offer a community discount?
No, haven't approached that. I don't think that, in my experience, I don't think that really works. I think for tree removal services, you've got arborists who do those kind of, you know, they'll do the simple D-space, they'll do the technical trees, removing that tree that's hanging over your house. That's expensive. Anybody that's done that, you know that. And then you have forestry companies that will do 20, 30, 40 acres, the kind of outfits that I would hire for open space. Generally, you don't find that. Like, there's that discount of doing a whole neighborhood doesn't really exist as far as I've found it. There are folks that work up here very regularly, and I find that just because they're up here so often, they do give better prices versus calling someone out of the yellow pages that might work down in Denver primarily. So there are folks, and if you need recommendations on folks that work up here for tree removal, you can shoot me an email and I can let you know.
And Dory, just a different take on this, where homes are close together, when your D-space overlaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really tricky. I mean, and again, that's where you have to have a conversation with your neighbor, right? It's going to be some give and take, right? Radiant heat is a real thing. I mean, you know, and I think sometimes we don't take it into consideration. You know, you need to have that conversation. You need to look at your windows and the trees around your windows. Yeah, again, I'm happy to come and facilitate a conversation and work with you and your neighbor, but it's definitely, it's something you need to discuss.
There was an analysis after the Paradise Fire about risk factors for losing a home. And unfortunately, I can't find the exact distance, but it was in the order of, if you were 10 feet or less from a neighboring home, you were at greater risk of losing your home because of the radiant heat. And again, think about what radiant heat is. And as Dory said, your windows are one of the biggest vulnerabilities. And then the other thing is, if embers are flying from this home, you don't want them to land on something flammable at your house.
So that you know, we've had questions come up at different plan units that have not been asked tonight, but that leads up to a good question. Dory, if people put Trex or similar products out for their decks or use them, are they flammable?
Well, they're definitely flame resistant and they generally melt over time. There's Trex. I use Fiberon. There's been studies with IBHS on decking. Generally decks, the joists are still wood, the supports are still wood. And so that's going to burn, so the only thing that really isn't right is if you do that steel frame. So yes, those materials are better, but you're still going to have to be on top of all of the leaf and needle debris between the planks, underneath, all of those things, but it's definitely better than wood.
And I think that goes with the hardy board siding as well. In the stuccos, they'll resist.
Correct, but I do want to say something about that. There's different companies of cement board, right? Not just Hardy. So make sure you research that. And then also on the stucco, something you need to know is on your stucco home, where the edges, if they're above the ground, and you can put your hand, if you can feel a gap there, that's open to embers. Okay, so a stucco home is a great thing, and I am not saying it's not, but I'm telling you, where the ground and the foundation and the stucco meet, you still need that 6 inches of protection. And if the underneath of your stucco is open, some things you can do, you can ask a contractor how to best close it off. You could put some fire block foam if the gap is not too great, because the embers can still get underneath the stucco. And that did happen in the Marshall fire. So please just note that even if we get these materials, we need to do all of the mitigating. Even around my house, I have the hardy board, but I still have to make sure I have that clearance so nothing can get up underneath my siding.
And then just another plug for the neighborhood walks. Dory, you gave such good advice to people on their specific homes, just like when their siding comes down closer to the roof, in terms of flashing, you talk about, well, maybe you could open that up a little bit so there's more flashing showing than that tight siding.
Right.
Another question that's come up in the past, Dory, I have a fire hydrant right next to my house. So does that mean I'm pretty safe? I don't have to worry about much of this?
Well, no, that's not what it means. In a structure fire, that's great. We're going to respond and we're going to hook up and we're going to put the fire out in your house. But if we're having a wildfire, we don't like to be tethered. It would have to be a really special or different circumstance where we would hook up to your hydrant. Generally, we don't do that. We have these giant apparatus called tenders that go to a spot that's safe to fill with water, and they bring us the water for our apparatus when we use it in a wildfire. We need to be able to move, and so we can't have our hoses all hooked up to hydrants. If that were the case, then resources couldn't come in and out because we don't normally drive over hoses. So no, we do not attach ourselves to a hydrant outside your home.
And then Andrea had some really good questions about, well, if there's an evacuation and there's enough time, are there things I can do that would be better? So she mentions, the electrical box, wherever it might be, should I turn the electricity off? She mentions, do I make sure the garage door is shut?
Sure.
And also, what about those propane canisters?
Right. Those are all really great questions. If we have a huge incident in our area, they're going to shut the gas off. We have huge pipes running through, that will be shut off. If you if you have those on the outside of your home to like a grill or whatnot, make sure those are shut. Yes, make sure all of your windows are shut. Your garage is shut. Your grill covers, bring those in. Bring in your cushions, your flags, your wooden decor. Time. This is all time sensitive, okay? If you don't have time, no. If you do have time, yes. Propane, any flammable things like that, put at the end of your driveway or as you leave. So then we, the firefighters, when we come through, we can see where the flammable things are. But please remember, all of this is time dependent.
Brian, maybe talk a little bit about where we are with the chance to get grants to cover some of the tree removal costs.
Yeah, so most years in the past, Genesee Foundation, and it's usually through volunteers in the Fire and Safety Committee, apply for a grant through the state to help folks pay for wildfire mitigation, defensible space around their home, and that comes in the form of 50% reimbursement. Last year, 2021, we applied for it. We didn't get it. There was a lot of money available from the state, filtered down from the feds, but we think that they're going away from defensible space and definitely going away from individual defensible space. So if there's one home on Sumac and then one home on Current, that doesn't really fit their idea of strategic value, spending their funding for wildfire mitigation in a strategic way. So when they announced this next grant cycle, I think in August or September of this year, they never really tell you an exact date until they just drop it. Then we're going to try to get neighborhoods to commit to do it together. Or also Dory's going to talk to HOAs down the hill that are a bit smaller and see if they would want to participate as well. But it requires any grant that you do with us or the state or the feds that includes defensible space, you have to do everything that you need to do, which for those that have had Dory come out to your home and do a home assessment, it can be a bit shocking because it's removed this tree, that tree, this tree, this tree, and it's doing a really good thinning in your 30 feet. You have to do all of it. You can't do half of it. You can't leave that one preferable tree. There is some leeway, there's some conversation, but there's standards and you have to follow those standards. Otherwise you don't get the funding for that wildfire mitigation. So we're going to try to do it in groups, neighborhoods, units.
Nancy, maybe this last question is that I see on the chat is about insurers covering the costs of some of the mitigation. Have you ever heard of any of that?
No. They will, many of them reward you with some reduction in premium if you can show them that you have a certificate that you have created defensible space. They also will send letters that say if you don't create defensible space, you need to find another insurer. We've had people who have interpreted that as meaning they need to clear cut their everything, and there was somebody who actually did that many years ago without going through the ARC. And you don't have to do that. In our experience, we've never had an insurer balk at being presented with a defensible space certificate. No matter what they say needs to be done, if you do it and it's certified defensible space, they will accept that, or they have accepted that in the past. I also want to mention that Jeffco Planning and Zoning is finally understanding their role in the properties in Jeffco that are above 6,500 feet in terms of fire mitigation. And they now, if you pull a building permit for a roof, it has to be a Class A non-flammable roof. Siding has to be fire resistant. Decking has to be fire resistant. And you will have to create defensible space. So it used to be that if you did an addition to your house that was greater than 399 square feet, you had to create defensible space. Now, if you pull a building permit for something on the outside, replacing a deck with a non-flammable decking material, exactly the same footprint, you will have to create defensible space. And Jeffco has a list of who they say is qualified to do that.
One more question along that line. Brian, what about mowing to help create defensible space?
Yep. if Dory does a home assessment, or if we go on a neighborhood walkthrough, I always recommend folks mow the grass to a height of 4 inches, at least 30 feet out from your house. And if you don't own 30 feet, if you own 10 feet and then there's open space, one of those policies that I mentioned is a policy to allow residents to do that very easily without too much of an obstacle. So it would just be talking to me about it and writing it down, saying this is what we're doing, and then filling out a waiver. Basically, it's the same waiver that we would use for our trail stewards. We have volunteers for our trails that use tools on our trails, similar waiver. And so again, the ARC and the board are trying to make it a lot easier to do wildfire mitigation.
All right, so I put the link in the chat box again with that. If you just click on that, it'll give you a page with lots of great information on the Genesee Foundation website, on the Genesee Fire Rescue website. Please check it out, contact us. The neighborhood walks, they really are just a great way to get to know your neighbors, to talk with us. It's pretty informal. We've done it when it's 5 degrees. We don't prefer that, but we did it. Anyway, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Again, please reach out with any questions you may have. And I hope that I will be at your home visiting. So anyhow, thank you, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you.